Hello and welcome to Folsom Field. I am Matt Smith. Thanks so much for being here and tuning in. Before I get rolling, like and subscribe. You know the drill. Then hype me up in the comments. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Colorado tonight drops this one to BYU 24-21. Falls to 0-2 in conference, 2-3 on the season. This was one Colorado gave away. The Buffs came out firing on all cylinders. It was the fastest start on both sides of the ball, arguably, of the Prime era, in my opinion. I'd have to go through and look, but as far as against a ranked team or a quality opponent, they got out of the starting blocks really quickly. Clearly, the game plan they had heading into this one was really good, and they executed incredibly well. 14-0 lead, you're feeling great. And then, man, that third drive, Coach Prime always talks about it. Normally, he's referencing it defensively. The third drive offensively, they went away from running the football, and they were gashing BYU. Draylon Miller was ripping them off. They didn't stop Draylon Miller, and then for some reason went away from him. Micah Welch was ripping him off at over 6 yards per carry and then went away from him. Caden Salter had more rushes tonight because of scrambles, but wasn't as effective as he was, certainly not against Wyoming, to be expected, but their ground game was working. And I felt like after getting a 19-4 rush to pass advantage to start this game, it really changed. There was 11 first downs for Colorado by the 7:30 mark of the second quarter, just one the rest of the way up until midway through the third quarter. Offensively, everything was moving so fast, and it felt like when they stopped running the ball, they just gave momentum away. And it's a fickle mistress, right? If you don't treat it with care and ride the wave, sometimes it can flip on you, and it did before the end of the first half. I have to tell you, this was probably the most I have ever disagreed with Coach Prime in a post-game presser. Just his takeaways. He put a lot of tonight on the players, saying we got to do it, we need guys to step up. I think they did step up in a lot of ways tonight, but the coaching staff, in my opinion, did not take the path of least resistance once the game got going. BYU's coaching staff definitely adjusted, but a lot of credit has to come to Colorado's coaching staff for the game plan that they put together to get them to that point. But once the script went away, it felt like so did their cohesion on offense, so did the right idea of what to do, in my opinion. I felt like there was a lack of awareness tonight that their rushing attack was fantastic, but for some reason felt like they kind of wanted to get Caden going through the air. He was 4 of 4 at one point, but again, BYU hadn't stopped him. So I think that's where things changed in the first half, and then some really inopportune penalties, just 6 of them, I believe, tonight, maybe 7 tonight for Colorado, but as Coach Prime said, the one thing I really did agree with him, it's just obviously inopportune timing. Back-to-back PIs as BYU's driving down the field to try and score and double up as they were getting the ball out of halftime, but, then the fourth drive of the game, there's a 2nd and 9 where they throw a little screen to Quentin Gibson, and they're ripping them off at over 6.5 yards per carry at that point, and you're across midfield, get yourself into third and manageable. It felt misguided after a certain point in time, and I felt like the in-game coaching let them down in a real way, because there were multiple opportunities, in my opinion, for them to really put the game away in the first half. I thought this should have been 28-10, maybe, at least 21-10 at the end of the first half, just 14-10. BYU gets the ball back. Good stop by Colorado's defense, and that's the one thing that real positive that I think needs to be highlighted. A total defensive effort. Yeah, there were some breakdowns. This defense is going to have some breakdowns. It's going to happen. They're just not talented enough, in my opinion, at some key positions. However, they weathered them, right? Like, they didn't give up too many big chunk explosives tonight, I didn't think. It was just more some bad timing on some penalties that helped BYU out a little bit, but they got them off the field, and continuing into the second half, continued to give Colorado chances to win this football game, which outside of Wyoming and Delaware, and I'm not really going to count those in the matter of this conversation because we're talking about beating Power 4 better teams, right? It felt like they did more than enough, and this was their best performance, which is really disappointing because that's an area where you felt pretty good about it. Coach Prime did not. In fact, I asked him after the game, you know, obviously you're not happy with the result, but defensively you got to be a little bit happy because it felt like they really gave them opportunities to win this game. They got them the ball back at several key situations, and he didn't even answer me. He just said, next question. He disagreed with me very heavily on that one. So take that for what you will. Some game management issues at the end of the first half. I'm not exactly sure why Colorado told Quentin Gibson to take the ball out. They had 46 seconds left in 2 timeouts. They hadn't taken the ball out once. You would get the ball at the 25 with 2 timeouts and 46 seconds, and all you would need to do is move the ball, I don't know, 40, 50 yards-ish to get into field goal range at that stage, and maybe not even. And they had him take it out. He runs it out to the 20. You're down to 36 seconds, still 2 timeouts. Caden Salter scrambles. I thought you'd take a timeout there and play for 3. You were trying to break up that section of doubling up for BYU, and I disagreed with that, the handling of that. After Caden Salter almost threw an interception a little bit later in that drive, I think it was the second play, I get it, but a timeout before that maybe settles everybody down. You still have 1 to play with. You still, at that stage, probably have over 30 seconds if you don't have Gibson bring it out. I thought that was mismanaged, in my opinion. Coach Prime said at that stage they were just trying to get it into the house. I would have been a little bit more aggressive there, assuredly, and at least just taken a timeout. Different than the Georgia Tech game where I wouldn't have taken the timeout after first down with a minute 15. At that stage, just burn one. I mean, you're getting them back anyway. What's the difference? You at least be aggressive and try and give yourself an opportunity. They didn't. They did hold BYU, and then they went 3 and out, and they held a field goal. They held BYU to a field goal, and then Colorado takes a 21-17 lead, and things, okay, you come out, the offense had stalled for the better part of about a quarter. You come out, and really great play calling, I thought, and execution from Pat Shermer. Hit a really nice one to Joseph Williams, Salter did, and then a big scramble, and it ended with this little read option, you know, read pass option look kind of to Draylon Miller. A really nice throw from Salter, great touch on a football. He was okay tonight. He had some decent moments, and I thought in the first half did a better job of deciding when to tuck and run, continually building. But maybe it was due to the fact that they were running the ball more. He just wasn't as in rhythm as a passer, but I didn't think that was a problem. I never thought it should have gotten there, and I thought that was a coaching oversight and overthinking, really, is what I thought it was. I was talking to Roddy Jones, who called the game for ESPN tonight at halftime, and he came down and looked at me and he goes, "Why did they stop running the ball?" I don't know. And then he said, "What about the end of the half?" I said, "I don't know." I just felt like it was all there for them, and they let it slip. And Coach Prime came out and said that he really didn't feel too bad about this one. Maybe that was putting on a facade. I'm not exactly sure. I'd be pretty upset if I were him with this one, because that was one that they should have won, undoubtedly. In a game where I thought Colorado could win a close one. I think there was a world where Colorado blows out BYU tonight if they just keep going there on that third drive. But anyway, defensively, I did think they stepped up and made plays. They went back to rotating at linebacker. Brown and Myers played with Hughes and French. Mixed bag there, but I thought it was good enough early. Like, L.J. Martin didn't gash him. It was Bear Bachmeier. And that's another game where Colorado allows a dual-threat quarterback over 100 yards on the ground, which, oh boy, they can't stop it. And that's not just like a Prime-era thing. That goes back like almost a decade now, where Colorado just has struggled to slow down dual-threat quarterbacks. And part of that, I think, in this group is because of the man-to-man. You just don't really have anybody accounting for that quarterback if he breaks a defensive line. There were a couple times tonight, maybe a big explosive on 3rd and 17 when you're up. I believe the score at that stage was 21-17. It's 3rd and 17. Bachmeier just breaks it down, goes right up the middle, makes it 4th and 2. BYU converts, and those are plays that just can't happen. Like, that's probably why Coach Prime's upset. There's plays like that. But I thought, again, okay, that stuff's going to happen. You still had plenty of opportunities to win that football game, even after BYU scores a touchdown and make it 24-21. I mean, they had ample opportunities to win that game at the end. And then a little later, with about 6:46 left, Coach Prime called a timeout on a 4th and 6 because he said in the post-game presser that he was really considering going for it. I personally think that's inexcusable. I mean, you can't take a timeout and burn it there when you're down 3. You're going to need that for your final drive if you use them, and I don't know. Taking a timeout to talk about that is just bad. It's just bad. And I respect having a feeling, having a vibe. You're not on your side of the field. It's 4th and 6. Your defense has played great. They just got BYU off the field. You got 6:45 left. Punt it away. I don't even know why there was a thought to go for it. I think that was a huge mistake, and maybe changes the way they operate a little bit on that last drive, because Colorado gets the ball back. On first down, they finally get that first down. I think it was 2 plays. They get the first down, and I thought Caden really needed a timeout. Like, it looked to me like Caden needed a breather. They ran the next play really quickly because the clock was going off, and I think they let at least 10 seconds go off the clock there. They weren't like completely dialed. It wasn't a terrible operation on that play, and he just throws a quick pick. But on the field, my gut level, I was like, oh man, timeout, timeout. And then he threw the pick. So I don't know, the truth is Colorado should have never been in those positions, because they should have put up more points in the first half and should have run the football more. I think between Draylon Miller and Micah Welch, I want to say they had 18 carries tonight, and both those guys averaged well over 6 yards per carry. Really don't know why they didn't rush the football more. I know Colorado struggled with running the football this year, but it was clear tonight that they were having a lot of success. And even though the final rushing numbers it look very skewed, 37-16, I thought they should have stuck with it even more, quite frankly. I mean, what's the difference how it looks if it's working? And it was working, and then it just felt like they did go away from it just a little bit and killed a couple of those drives with just, some interesting calls. And then coming out of halftime, I don't know why their default is throws behind the sticks on 3rd down and those little bubble screens, but I would have liked to see them get back to running the football coming out of half. They didn't, and it is what it is. There was, I think Salter finishes with 17 carries tonight. I don't mind him being involved that much, but when you do have an off night where your running backs are actually doing the job, you got to give those guys the football. And it just felt like, they didn't do it enough, because that was what was working. And it felt like there wasn't enough awareness. So anyway, look, this one sucks, quite frankly. This was a great opportunity to turn the boat on the season, to really attack this full, dive into conference play here. You had that little warm-up game against Houston. What happened, but this one was a giant missed opportunity. Giant. Colorado has one top 25 win in the Coach Prime era, and I believe it's one in their last 17 tries heading into tonight. Now, maybe you think it's one for the last 18, if memory serves. It might be 17. There might be one off, but the point is that this was a game that, in a year where the Big 12 is very average across the board, in my opinion, and you have a lot of similarly talented teams, this is one you had to get, and they didn't. And that's a bummer, because now you're going on the road to TCU, who just absolutely melted down and choked at Arizona State in a game they had no business losing. They're going to be super motivated, and they're going to want their get back for what happened, even though it was 2023. Don't think for a second that's not on Sonny Dykes' mind, and I'm sure they're looking at Colorado as a good get-right game. But the Buffs, I think there's something to work with here. I really do now. You just have to take advantage of your opportunities, and I felt like, in my opinion, I felt like coaching did hold them back. Now, certainly I didn't think Caden Salter was great tonight. He had a couple of scrambles that were just awful. I mean, just awful. The 22-yard sack to completely take them and flip the field and give BYU a short field, which, by the way, good on Colorado's defense for holding them there and forcing a punt, because I mean, that was surprising in and of itself, but that sack was worse than any Shedeur took the entire time he was here, with a much worse offensive line. So I don't know. That one, asked Caden after the game about, what he's really changed the last 2 weeks. He talked about being the leader that his team needs and how much that Houston game really aided him, and he was really upset during that game, and you can tell, like, it's a different version of him. He made too many mistakes, and I thought wasn't helped out enough, in my opinion, and I, again, have been defending this coaching staff quite a lot this year amidst a lot of other people, throwing a bunch of dirt on Pat Shurmur's name. And look, I mean, there's things everybody can get better at, but I would say that I've been probably one of the more staunch defenders of even some of the things that have been questions among the fan base. And tonight, I feel like I totally disagreed with Coach Prime for probably the first time since I've been around, And look, it's not like he wasn't completely wrong in that some guys need to step up, but you're not going to get perfect games across the board, and there was one there for the taking tonight, and I just didn't think they put their kids in a great position. But that's just one man's opinion. And Coach Prime, I think after the game, we had another interesting interaction. I asked him about defense and coming out to such a fast start and then things kind of tapering off. He's like, media acts like they can't see. You guys act like you can't see, is what he said. I go, doesn't matter what I see. It's your opinion that matters. And tonight, that was his opinion, is that the players just aren't getting the job done. And, he certainly owned it up and said, we have to be better. It wasn't like it just felt like maybe a little bit misguided. If it were me in that position, I would have been pretty upset with my staff for losing that football game. There were some times where they were disjointed, coming in and out of timeouts, like the fourth down that BYU scored on to make it 14-10. There was a timeout before the third down. They it was third and goal. They run on third down, Colorado stops them. Great, right? Great. But it felt like either they didn't have a fourth down play call in, which would have been after the timeout, and you've got to know during that timeout that BYU's going to be in four down territory. There were already a couple opportunities in that game for them to go for it in fourth down, including on the opening drive, and you stopped them. But then there was substitution mistakes and confusion there. I just felt like in some really bad moments. And Coach Prime did say this, and this is one part that I really did agree with him, that there are some moments that are too big. And I think that is accurate, but they could have avoided having those moments be as big as they were if they had executed and probably seen things just a little bit differently. And, it seemed to be pretty consensus, online, and obviously it's easy to say things when you're not on the headset and you don't know what's going on, but I felt like tonight was pretty cut and dry. They had one that they pissed away, and that sucks because this is a year that'll probably be leaner than the last couple, and the ones that come around, you got to grab those suckers. And tonight, Butterfingers, they just let that one slip. It's unfortunate. It feels like timeouts right now are a little bit of a problem, and I wouldn't always say that. That's not something that I say lightly. I definitely agree with Coach Prime's approach to go by feel. It just feels like in some of those moments, maybe the feel wasn't, maybe it's either too optimistic for the moment and you kind of have to play within that play, or it's just a different feel than maybe is typical. And the other thing I would say is it is not uncommon for football teams, and every NFL team does this, to have somebody up in the booth feeding you your options in your ear. And I don't believe they have that. Maybe they do it as a collective, but like an analytics guy whose sole job is to manage time, then Coach Prime wouldn't have to worry about it. And then you can have a conversation with somebody and you can set some of that stuff up, but it feels like maybe there's a little bit too much flying by the seat of their pants when they could have saved some time in some pretty important moments. But again, I feel like this was actually a very well played game in many areas by the Buffs, but Caden wasn't who he was the other night against Wyoming, and we talked about this week, that he was going to have to play at or near that level to win. Well, he didn't really tonight. It was the running game that that I thought really got them out to a great start, and again, just kind of went away from it. Even Brian was asking those questions. Coach Prime said, oh, we didn't really get away with it. The game kind of dictated it. I don't know how, because they were in control, up multiple touchdowns, run the ball, bleed the clock, and it just felt like there was a disconnect there. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating because they have a very high standard. The one thing that is for sure is that the secondary has let them down. Certainly that opposite corner spot, tough. Colton Hood with another pick six for Tennessee today. That one sucks, thinking back on. And they're figuring it out. Deion Parks played tonight. R.J. Johnson's been out for a couple of weeks. Makari Vickers played sparingly, but year 3 of the Coach Prime era, you would definitely expect them to be more dominant at corner. You'd expect them to be deeper at corner, and they're just not right now, and I think that bothers him a lot, which it should. So this one is going to take a little while. Tawfiq Byard after the game, I said, even though you lost and you're going to have to learn from a loss, is there a bit of a confidence boost? Because it did feel like they leveled up a little bit tonight, like they matured a little bit tonight. He's like, no, we had it, which to me, that is a confidence builder, because if you feel like you can say you had it, that's better than they've been in big games, or certainly against Georgia Tech. No one was saying, we really felt like we had it. It was like they had a shot, but they didn't really have it. But Houston couldn't say that. Tonight, I think for the first time, you could say, man, we had it, and we just let it go. And I think you should be able to derive some confidence from that, even though it's hard to right now. Moving forward, you have a higher opinion of yourself if you stay together as a cohesive unit, and they're going to be relying on leadership that they're struggling to find, and that needs to continue to develop. And there is plenty of opportunity here on this team if you show up, and Coach Prime keeps talking about consistency. 10 guys doing their job, 1 guy not. I'm not even just sure. I know that there is a lot of that. It just felt like there was much less of it tonight, and it was the direction that let them down. So that's my opinion. You can have your own. We'll see what it looks like heading into TCU. Special teams tonight, Damon Greaves with his first shank, and CU even stopped BYU after that. Like, they did a lot of good things tonight, I thought. They did a lot of good things tonight, just not enough. And certainly, Caden did not play his best when the pressure ramped up. And that one is frustrating, certainly, because we know what he's going to need to do to win games. However, that wasn't where this game was lost, in my opinion. So thanks for tuning in. Much appreciated. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hype me up down below. And we'll talk to you coming up this week as we get ready to go down there to Fort Worth and TCU. Appreciate everybody out there, and hope you all have a great rest of your weekend.